So let's talk a little bit about where you're struggling with your routines because many adults with ADHD struggle with structure and following rules and creating routines. And starting a tedious and unrewarding a task can be challenging, and it can be equally tough to stick with it until completion. So for neurodivergent people, those people with ADHD and friends, that's what I like to call you, whether it's anxiety or depression or bipolar or substance abuse or eating disorder or learning disability or ASD, we people who have uniquely wired brains can be overly fixated on maintaining a routine at the expense of other things, which can actually turn into a vicious cycle of frustration and self-defeat. Or they can be, attached to a routine because it actually gives them pleasure and helps them feel a sense of control, but they are inflexible. They could be inflexible around it, or perhaps not able to, you know, um, tweak things when they're not working. So I see lots of amazing comments, and I'm going to go back here. So, Donna, how can I self-treat my ADD as getting medication for ADD requires psychiatric visits that may or may not yield a prescription? So, Donna, I'm not sure how to answer this question, but I think that there are two things that we do to treat ADHD. Medication is one thing that works for many people, but the main thing is actually working on and getting support and learning executive functioning skills because pills don't teach skills. And what everybody with ADHD needs is help managing their executive functioning skills. So Lynn says, follow through. Mary, I receive your hug. Electra, thank you. Veronica, keeping routines for more than 2 weeks. So, one thing that happens to a lot of people with ADHD is that routines get boring. It's like, oh, the same thing. What am I going to look forward to? I'll never forget how my husband, we were much younger and was starting a business, and he and his business partner, they would bring the same lunch every day. And to me, I thought, well, I go, bring lunch is fine, but I could never eat the same tuna salad or the same, you know, uh, cheese, tomato, and lettuce sandwich. I need some variety. And so I think that happens for a lot of people with ADHD. It's hard to sort of keep the routine going because it loses its interest. It's not a shiny um, new penny. So in those cases, what we want to do is have a routine that allows for us to put in some things that will light us up and keep us going. Let's see. Thanks, Christine. Too many things fall into the category of routines, getting back on track. So that's a great thing to bring up, Mary. So what happens to a lot of people is that, we can sort of start something, but then something happens that throws us off our routine and we get confused. We're not sure exactly how to get back on track. And so one of the things that we need are signals and notes and post-its and tools to help us reorient. You're welcome, Fabiola. Vicky, I cannot start the day. I procrastinate and feel overwhelmed starting the day and then starting any task. So one of the things that I think would help, Vicky, is if your goals for starting the day are a little smaller and you try to do some things for the next day the night before. I work with a lot of people of different ages with ADHD, and one thing that I never forget from this 7-year-old boy I worked with um, was he would take his bath and then he put on his clothes for the next day. And the parents were like, no, no, we want you to put your pajamas on, and then tomorrow you can put your clothes on. And he said to them very, very frankly, he's like, I don't want to do that. That's a waste of time. I'm clean. My clothes are clean. I can sleep in them and get up the next morning, and then I don't have to take the time to get dressed. He had figured out a little tool for himself where he was able to just get up and get dressed and go on, and that worked. And so, but he did it the night before because that helped decrease his anxiety and stress. Routines highlight how we spend the hours of our days and the days of our weeks. And whether it's in the morning or the evening or exercise or cleaning or self care, they offer structure that assists us with creating the order most of us need to get by every day. So when we have habits that we can continue every day, we actually start to feel less pressured and more successful because we're in the flow. And we don't have to, stick with it. It doesn't have to be the routine of every day. I was talking with someone yesterday and their goal was to get to work 2 days a week on time because they knew they couldn't do it 5 days. So they shifted what they wanted their routine and their habit to be so it could be achievable. And that's what I'm sharing with you. Bob, feeling like it limits my choices or freedom, feeling subject to something else. So one of the things a lot of people don't like with ADHD, particularly teens with ADHD don't like, is that routines kind of feel like they're confining you. But actually, they offer you more space because you're not having to deal with the overwhelm of so many choices. You've narrowed your field. And when that field is narrowed, then you can plop something in that might be a little special decaf latte or whatever you like, so to speak, that can then help you keep going. SEM struggling with study work routine. Yep. So how are we going to keep a balance between, the things that we need to do, like studying and working, and also, refueling ourselves? So, Electra, struggling on maintaining routines. If I miss a day, it's hard to get back on track. Right. And so, one of the reasons that it's hard to get back on track is the negative conversation you tell yourself about missing a day. Instead of being able to say, oh, I missed a day. It's okay. That happens sometimes. I'll do it tomorrow. And here's what I'm going to do to set myself up for success. You start to run a whole negative conversation about what a loser you are or how terrible it is that you didn't do the routine. And so then you try it again. Kashi, we are lucky. Oh, thank you, Kashi. Start a task like studying. So it's hard to start tasks, mostly because they usually seem too big. So what we want to do is keep our tasks small. So maybe brainstorm, 3 or 4 things that you want to put in your routine. Start with the first thing and then break that down into some smaller parts. So you can do one smaller part and feel like, whoa, look at me. I'm actually doing the thing that's contributing to this shift. It's very small. I took French for a long time in school, and my beloved French teacher, Madame Rollet, may she rest in peace, used to say, "Petit à petit, l'oiseau fait son nid," which means little by little, the bird builds its nest. And that's exactly what we're talking about today with routines. Distractions, yes, Gail, often prevent you from following through with routines. So we have to limit what we're going to pay attention to because if you are easily distracted, what we want to do is notice the distraction and then bring ourselves back to the task at hand. And that's very difficult for people with ADHD because you have the distraction and then you just want to keep going on the distraction because it's kind of pleasant or you're enjoying it. And so we need to notice when we're distracted, and instead of chiding ourselves, just like you would bring a puppy back, you bring that puppy back and you say, okay, here we go. We're directing over this way. I can't get to all the comments, so I'm very sorry. Kashima, starting in and then forgetting to do it. No motivation to start the day. Okay, you struggle to get out of bed. I think I said something about that, Vicky. Struggle to be ready and productive when left to your own devices. So what you're going to need is to set up things where you're not left to your own devices, where you actually think about how long things are going to take, and then you set aside time and then you add extra time so that it's there. But you've got to start to create a more positive feedback loop. Molly says, I feel paralyzed even at the thought of a routine. So you're thinking too big, Molly. You're magnifying, you're globalizing. Small, 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 small. One small thing you can do every day. And then when you do that small thing, let's say that it's not even every day. Let's say it's 5 days out of 7 or 3 days out of 7. You can pat yourself on the back that you actually did it. You're working on it. Change is a process. Our job is to notice the progress, not the lack of progress. Supplements can help. I'm not an expert, but there's a lot of stuff on attitude about that. Anna says, I have procrastination overload. Right. And procrastination is a form of anxiety, and it's usually perfectionism or avoidance or productive procrastination. And when we're procrastinating, it's because, again, that task seems too big, or you're putting pressure on yourself to get it exactly right. Let's dial that down, right? You don't have to get to the top of the mountain on your first day of hiking. You might just hike 30 feet. That's great. You've made 30 feet of progress. Break things down so that you feel like you can actually try it. Okay. Um, Veronica, I love finding new ways to structure my life on the internet, and they're novel and interesting for a few weeks and then meh. So, Veronica, one thing that you need to know about yourself is like you could have a routine that works for 2 or 3 weeks and then set something on your calendar on your phone, and you'll be like, guess what? Time to, switch it up a little bit because I get bored. Not to be mad at yourself because you get bored, but to accept that and use that and enjoy it. Um, Debbie, making routines that work for me. For example, I do not have a cleaning routine, so I never clean my house, even though I would like to. This is a great comment, Debbie, and a terrific example. So, house cleaning is something that is really challenging for a lot of people, and often because people walk into a room and there's so much stuff that needs to be addressed in the room that they're overwhelmed, they turn around and they leave, right? So, what I want you to do when you have a cleaning routine is to pick one aspect of cleaning. I'm going to go through that stack of mail on my kitchen table and get rid of anything that is not personally directed to me. That's all I'm going to do. Or I'm going to clean the sink only and not the area around the sink. Or I'm gonna put some music on and have an accountability buddy and set a goal with them, and we're gonna do something together. They'll do their thing, I'll do mine, and then we'll check back and give each other support and see how we're doing. Again, when we think of routines, we get debilitated because we want something big and perfect that we're always going to be able to do and it's going to solve our problems. And the fact is that that's not what we need. If I look at my office, which actually needs to be cleaned right now, and I'm going to clean this whole thing, I will do nothing, right? But if I say, okay, I'm only going to clean this little area, um, around my actual computer, I can make progress with that and feel like, oh, okay, I'm moving forward, because that's what we're looking for, is some sense of forward motion. Katie, facts. I've had pills for 18 years and still can't function, need the skills. And that's what we're talking about today, are skills. So, habits basically they're part of what's called a habit loop, and they're made up of cues and repeated behaviors, and then the benefit of doing it, often called the reward. They're patterns of behavior that are often regularly repeated until they become, in a way, involuntary. And some habits and routines are healthier than others. But it's the satisfaction, not just of making the habit, but of being able to do a part of it that can overtake any other thoughts of a different choice that could be debilitating for you. Um, so let's see, it's the monotony. That's right. So I want to tell you about someone who I worked with who wanted to really improve her time management. And so she was a teacher, and she decided to commit to her students and her colleagues that she was going to get to work on time every day. And the reason that she wanted to do that was A, she got preferred parking, and B, she couldn't stand how stressed out she was, and C, her students laughed at her when she came into the room 2 or 3 minutes late, and she was getting written up on her performance. So she committed this to everyone. And then by committing it, people wanted to help her. And they helped her figure out what time she actually needed to leave her house to get to school on time and feel relaxed. And she started doing it. And the first day that she was on time, her class, her homeroom class, broke out into applause. The second day that she did it, her homeroom class broke out into applause. We need that positive feedback that we're on the right track. How are you going to set that up for yourself? Because you may or may not be able to give it to yourself, and that's okay. Don't feel bad about it. You may need to hear it from someone else. Um, Unexpected interruptions mess everything up. Yes, they do. And those interruptions are things that we have to account for. So we might account for the 30 minutes that it takes to drive to our office. But what we don't account for is that there's an accident on the road and we really needed an extra 15 minutes or 20 minutes. You can't always plan that, but you can plan to look at Google Maps or whatever or Waze before you go to work and see what the time is that you're going to need, and to have a cushion. And it's that cushion that's so important. Um, Routines when schedules are inconsistent due to kids' needs, sports, schoolwork, etc. Right. So when you're a parent and you're raising kids, things happen, things interfere, things you don't expect. And that's okay. There's no problem with that. What we want to do is to, again, make sure that there's some flexibility in that. In Jamaica, when I've worked there and done some training, they call it rubber time. You need a little rubber time wherever you go to allow for something unexpected, and that things happen that you don't plan for, and how are you going to adjust to that without having a crisis in response? Olga, I was encouraged to make the less desirable tasks more desirable by making it a special time. I love this. Set up an area that's quiet, comfortable, peaceful, play favorite music, favorite beverage, or a snack. Right. So, what you're doing is you're putting the have to before the want to. You're setting up an inherent reward for yourself for doing something. And this is what motivates most of us. Internal motivation kind of coalesces around the late teens, early 20s for most people with out ADHD. And so we want to add a few years to that. So we're into our mid 20s when that happens. So we have to help our kids and ourselves do the have to and then the want to, that the want to is that incentive with that little extra reward and carrot. Sarah, my daughter will fix on a routine and it works for a while, but then she drops her routine and then wonders why she gets disorganized and discouraged. Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. So I think in these situations with kids who are working on a routine and it's working out and then it starts to unravel, we want to get on that like white on rice. And we want to say, hey, you know what? I notice that it's getting harder to do your routine. Let's talk about it. Is it getting boring? Are you losing interest? Is it not working as well? What can we do to tweak it to keep the momentum going? That is the goal, right? Um, let's see. Kashi, I use calendar entries and alarms, excuse me, on my cell phone as reminders when doing new and adjusted routines. Fabiola, it's helping me to use a checklist to all things I benefit getting done, but if I can only remember to use it right. So we have to remember to use the tools we have, and setting, audio alarms and banners and things that fly across our screen and our phone can be very useful. Cassandra, hi. We have a lot of food hyperfixations in our house, so we go with those. But I often keep buying the foods, and then the hyperfixation ends, and I'm stuck with like 2 bunches of bananas that nobody wants to eat because once it's done, it's done. Time for banana bread, I think, Cassandra. Um, that's a tough one. It's a tough. That's a really kind of challenging question because you don't know when the hyperfixation is going to end, and you want to prepare for it and not waste food. So, I just would say, I guess that means going to the grocery store and buying smaller quantities. So let's look at 5 tips to help you set up and maintain routines. So first of all, I want you to take a minute and think about one aspect of your day that is not working for you right now. What is one aspect of your day? Be specific, but with a narrow focus, because this is the first thing that you want to try. Um, There are so many comments. I'm sort of debating whether to do the comments or my tips, but I'm going to stick with my tips and then come back to the comments. Um, um, Organize the steps that you need for your new routine and keep them simple and small. So do that brain dump of maybe 4 or 5 things, and then take one of those and break that down into smaller pieces so that becomes your routine. Otherwise, you have too many tasks and you're frustrated and you don't get to them and you don't sense any kind of forward motion. So you want to identify what motivates you. Is it that cup of tea when you've done the sink and a little time doing Wordle, or, a game on your phone, and can you set an alarm to make sure you can stop doing that game, or sit outside with your dog? What is it that is going to motivate you? Is it something external like a coffee or recognition from someone? Or is it something internal, like reaching a personal goal for satisfaction? There's no right or wrong answer. Look for what's effective. And again, we want to think about who's in our support team here for doing these routines. Because we want to support, we need that sag wagon, we want that support group. Um, um, Many adults with ADHD experienced a childhood that was filled with criticisms and judgments and negativity for being neurodivergent in ways that they could not control. And now I suspect, in fact, I'm pretty sure most adults do this to themselves. And the positive to negative balance in your head is so skewed that it makes it difficult for you to actually forgive yourself for the natural challenges of everyday life. If you have kids and you have a routine, of course, something is going to interrupt that. That's to be expected. Let's plan on that rather than being shocked and surprised when it happens, right? So we want to also bring the present into the future. One of the reasons that it's tough to change is that the consequences of not changing may not be immediate enough to pressure you to do it now. With the now or not now aspects of the ADHD brain, unless the present is miserable, change really isn't going to occur because you're going to continue to sort of ignore it or cope with it or deny it. So we want to bring the future into the present. So think about how you'll feel if you don't follow through with your new routine that you've set up for yourself. See your future and ask about how you want to think about yourself in the present. Do I need to impose some artificial consequences instead of waiting for natural negative ones to occur? How can I make this shift daily and nurture consistency without self-blame or shame? So once you've narrowed down this habit, again, I want you to try to commit to doing something that's manageable and is not too daunting, and to aim for completion of this smaller task so that you can, talk it up with a friend, a colleague, a partner, a coach, your students, your therapist, and feel like, yes, I'm sticking with what I said I was going to do. Okay, so let's go back to all of these amazing comments, and I'm going to try my best to get to them. Arusha, is there such a thing as a starter routine for those who have no routines at all? For example, wake up the same time every day. Yep, that's a great thing to do. Start a routine, or I might want to say, have meals at a regular time. Um, the simpler that you can start, the better it is. So I'm going to wake up every day, maybe at 7. I'm going to do my meditation, but I'm going to get out of bed by 7:30. That's the time I'm aiming for. And then when you do that, you can say, okay, I have this little bit of regularity that's giving me a little structure. Um, Again, people can feel like the structure is choking them. We want to feel like the structure kind of helps put pins in your day, right? So it's kind of like, it's not something that's rigid, but it's something that's guiding you through the course of the choices that you're making. Jessica, what helps me is small steps to build or a timer. I love that. Yes, small steps to build on and a timer, please. The Pomodoro method, your phone, the tomato timer, a regular old buzz timer in the kitchen, anything like that. Annie, can you make sure that you repost my handout for people for today? Thank you. So do ADHD people have trouble with a foreign language? I sure did. Je ne sais pas, it didn't stick. A lot of people with ADHD do have trouble learning a foreign language. So thanks for bringing that up, Susan. Is keeping a tracker helpful or detrimental? Fabiola, I'm not sure what you mean by a tracker. I think some people can find a tracker helpful, and there are lots of apps about that. And some people find it, that it sort of falls into, oh, finger wagging, look what I'm not doing. Lisa, procrastination is a form of anxiety. I've never heard that before, but it makes sense. Oh, yes, procrastination is very much a form of anxiety. And because we're putting off something that we are concerned about doing, or we're not confident that we can do, or we feel uncertain or insecure about. Val, going back to daily exercise routine, even if I know this will minimize most of my biggest challenges. Yes, I mean, I think being able to go outside every day or every 3 or 4 days a week, even you're just walking for 20 minutes, this kind of routine gives you a gift that you can't articulate, but your inner wise self knows that you're doing one thing for yourself that only you can do. And it also bathes your brain in endorphins, which helps you feel better about yourself. Okay. The cleaning and the hubs cleans to sparkle. The cleaning and hubs cleans to sparkle, so we're in constant anxiety. Okay. So, in some relationships, some people are the cleaners, like the dirt and stuff, and some people are the organizers of clutter. So try to figure out in your relationship if you're like, I'm better with the clutter, or I'm better with actually scrubbing the dirt off of this pan. And then divide that between you and your partner for specific tasks or just in general. Say, okay, you know what, I'm going to be the scrubber person and you can be the clutter person on today for cleaning, and then next week we'll switch. So that there's, again, some sense of, people doing what they're good at and they like to do. That will help people with ADHD. Veronica, it's so hard as a recovering perfectionist to congratulate myself for a partially done job or to go back to a routine that I've broken. Yes, yes, it is. Recovering perfectionist here. I want to say it is very hard when I've done a job that I know it doesn't feel like it's like my best standout job, but it's good enough. And I was talking with a group. I run groups for adults with ADHD and anxiety, and I'm finishing one in a few weeks. So stay tuned. I'll probably do another one in January. And I asked people in the group, what does good enough mean for you? And people were sort of stuck. Like, I don't know what good enough means. So I would encourage you to think about that. For those of you who feel like, well, if I don't do my routine or my habit perfectly, it doesn't matter. What does good enough mean? How will you know you're on track? Right? We want to notice the efforting, the full body, physical, psychological, emotional coming together to do something versus then sort of a toss away, a try, right? We want to pay attention to that efforting and value it. Mary, I started cleaning because I need to make things tidy, but as I'm putting things away, I find myself doing that as well and hardly stop until I'm finished. And then I feel accomplished, but then I feel my day's gone and stress over things I'm having to do. Okay, so set a timer for yourself, Mary, and just, say, okay, I'm going to do this for this amount of time, and then I'll circle back to it in 6 hours to finish it. So I'm going to clean out the sink in my kitchen now in the morning, and then I'll come back to it after dinner, and then let it go. Aubrey, I like the cleaning aspect she explained, but what about piling things up instead of putting clothes away or throwing the trash away that's only a few feet away? So, this is an interesting point. Piling things up actually makes you generally feel worse, although most people say, well, I know what's in that pile and I know what's in that pile. The sense of having multiple piles, it can actually make you feel more overwhelmed and out of control. So what I would encourage you to do is if you're going to make a pile, Commit to a time when you're going to actually go through the pile and think about the function of the pile. If you're going through you're pulling out your winter clothes here, the weather's starting to change, and you find some stuff you don't like and you put it in a pile, put it in a bag and mark it give away. And then it actually has a place to live, and then you can do something with it. Um, Throwing the trash away, instead of just letting it pile up. When do you notice that it's time to take it out, and how can you, actually give yourself permission to do that without necessarily interrupting something else? Like, set some times. Like, I'm going to set 30 minutes for emptying the trash at my house once a week on Saturday at 10, or whenever, or Saturday morning. When you can actually attach time to a task, your chance of making it a habit is much greater. Melissa, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I find myself trying to escape monotony. How can I change that? Well, Melissa, I think the way that you can help yourself change the monotony is to shake up the order of how you do things and when you do them. Olga, lose the all or nothing thinking. Amen. That is a struggle for me. Yes, it's being recorded. Making myself accountable to others actually increases my anxiety. Thanks for sharing this, Fabiola. And my sense of disappointing someone. And for some reason, if I fail one day, am I any way to get around the self-shaming? I would pick someone that you can be accountable to who actually also struggles with ADHD, and who really is someone that loves you with an open heart and you love them, and so you're not anxious, and that you have a time where you can each say, okay, here's the thing I feel ashamed about, but I'm just going to share it in the no judgment zone, because you're doing the best you can, and so is everybody else. And it looks like everybody's got it all together because that's how it looks on social media. But I'm going to tell you from my chair as a therapist of 30 years, that is false. Those Instagram accounts and Facebook and whatever else, Twitter, and I can't keep up with, those are all carefully, carefully put together. Nobody's going to post a picture of themselves with a big pimple on their face and say, hey, does anyone have something like this? I mean, maybe some people will, but most people won't. So give yourself some permission to be human. We are supposed to make mistakes. That's what a growth mindset is. You make a mistake, you learn from it, you regroup, and then you try again. It's that fixed mindset. I can't make any mistakes. I'm not actually going to learn anything. I can't change, that gets us all in trouble. How do you adjust to things beyond your control that impact you, like it's something eating at you? For example, I was wrongly accused of something and now it's eating at me years later. Mary, it sounds like this is an incident that is in your past that you can do nothing with and nothing about. And so what you might want to do is, check out some forgiveness meditations, or if you're a religious person, talk to someone at your religious organization. You were accused of something that's far in the past. And so there's forgiveness for that person, but there's also letting it go for yourself because it's haunting you and holding you back from being in the present. Marie, same 100%. If I announce my goal, I feel like everyone turns into a watchdog and judges me. Okay, so that's not for you. It is for some people, it's not for others. If you feel like announcing your goal means everyone's going to, be judging you, maybe the person that you need to share it with is your journal, or maybe the person that you need to share it with is your therapist, and hopefully you don't feel judged by that person, or your coach. You want to find someone who actually is your ally, is your advocate. Okay. Let's see, 20s, if only. I'm 58 and I still have huge issues with motivation and self-discipline. Of course, because a lot of that has to do with having ADHD. And so a lot of adults with ADHD struggle with motivation and self-discipline, and there's so much shame around the fact that you have these struggles that it makes it almost impossible to really tackle them and make changes. Jill, Updates on electronics, passwords, etc., end up making me late with deadlines. Okay, so again, what we want to do is try to set some time in the course of a day where that you have 9 to 9:30 is my update electronic password time, and then that's it for the week, and I'll come back the following week. You have to set limits on things. I find that it's very difficult today with working at home and working remotely to set limits on how much I work. It's almost like I'm constantly working because it's always there. And this is something that developed for me during COVID, and it's not healthy. And I think that a lot of people actually struggle with this because we have our phones with us all the time. We have access to, huge swaths of information networks and other people everywhere. Um, Keeping rooms clean is a challenge. Yep. So again, you want to, kind of make lists. I do this when I'm working with families with kids. We say to our kids, you need to clean up your room. And they'll look at you like, okay, and they'll start with one thing, like they'll start picking up some toys from the floor, and then they'll be like, "Oh my God, I love this thing. I want to play with this thing." Or, "Oh, this is my shirt. I love this shirt. Let me put this shirt on." So we want to try to have some sort of map about how we're going to clean, how we're going to organize that actually we can follow so we don't have to sequence and struggle with the prioritizing in the moment, which is hard for ADHD brains. It's like you're organizing, you're sequencing, you're planning and prioritizing, and you're dealing with the stuff in front of you. It can just be too much. Could I use laundry for an example? Okay, so you have laundry, you put it in maybe a basket or whatever, a laundry bin, and it grows and it grows and it grows into like a big pile, and suddenly you have no underwear or socks. And then instead of having to do just 1 or 2 loads of laundry, you have 7 loads of laundry to do. And it could take all day, it could take all weekend, it could mean spending, hours and hours at the laundromat. So the question is that obviously having your laundry like pile up like that for 2 weeks isn't going to serve you in the long run. So how can you say, okay, um, Sunday morning is laundry day. I hate laundry, but I'm going to do my whatever laundry I have, whether I have 4 pieces or 14 pieces, I'm going to do it on Sunday so that I don't end up with that massive pile. Because what we're doing now is we're going into the future. We're thinking about how we're going to feel in the future when we have that massive pile and it's bad. So we're going to bring that into the present and say, okay, even though I don't like doing my laundry, I'm going to make myself do it at this time once a week so I don't end up in that future place. Marie, job hunting. I should be applying to a few jobs every day, but I procrastinate. So, probably procrastinate because job hunting is not very pleasant and there's no inherent reward and there's a lot of rejection. So I think, what I would encourage you to do is to set a time, 10 to 11. I'm going to apply for these jobs and I'm going to set something up for myself at 11 that I love to do, whether I'm going to go for a run or have coffee with a friend or talk to somebody on Zoom or FaceTime. It doesn't matter. I'm going to have that reward set up for myself after the thing I don't like. Okay. All right. Um, We have a family notebook that has a lot of paperwork we need to reference frequently, passwords. That's great so that you don't have to keep it in your head. Google Calendar can work also. Um, yes, this is a great tie-in with Attitude's recent time blindness webinar. Ari is a friend of mine, and I love his talk on time blindness about how time is so slippery, and you may not feel time. And so some of what I'm talking about is actually some stuff I've learned from him. Veronica, I'm still not sure how to motivate myself without shame. Well, maybe that's something that we could talk about here in one of these Facebook Lives. We could dedicate a Facebook Live to self-motivation without shame. Because shame is actually not an effective motivator. Shame will decrease your motivation because it'll make you feel bad about yourself, and then you don't have the effort to actually do what you need to do. Sonia, I can't clean alone. I need someone around to keep me on task. Great. Family clean time. Sounds great. Or have a friend come over and offer to make them a nice dinner to keep you company while you do it. Um, let's see. Yes, Ari, I'm sure was wonderful. How will you feel if your present self, how will you feel as your future self is dealing with the consequences of the choice that your present self has made? So you take that future feeling and you bring it into the present and you switch a choice that you're making. Annie, please would you post my post my my gift for everyone because we're gonna stop in 4 minutes. Thank you, Annie. Okay, I see you did that. How do I overcome perfectionism to set these things up? Okay, you wrote protectionism. So the way that we overcome perfectionism is by giving ourselves permission to do it wrong, because there is actually no right way that of the way that we want to do things. We are telling ourselves that there's a right way. What we need to tell ourselves is, there's a lot of ways to do things. Some are more effective than others. So I'm going to try something to see if it's effective. It's an effective experiment. And then I'm going to get some feedback and I'll make a tweak or two, and then I'll try something else. Sonia, I was so proud of myself. I went to the gym for 6 weeks straight. Fabulous. And then the excuses came and that went down the drain. Okay, so I'm going to do a reframe for you on this, Sonia. You went to the gym for 6 weeks straight. That's amazing. And you stumbled. You're human. So, you know what? It's not down the drain. You had a little trip up. You had a little slip up. How can you just go back to the gym? It's the judgment around the slip up that makes it impossible to continue the routine. I'm bad. I failed. It's useless now. We need to take that out of your vocabulary. Yes, perfectionism is debilitating because you can't start things or you can't finish things. And so, what we want to be able to do is to learn how to give ourselves the opportunity to just give it a shot and turn it in, even if it's not perfect. Because the problem is, by not completing things, you're feeding the perfectionism and the negative judgment of yourself. Susan, structure for a day is like trellis for a plant to help it climb high and thrive. That is absolutely beautiful. Melissa, I constantly fight playing with my kids and cleaning. I can't stand a messy house, so I always say no. Melissa, what I want to say to you is your kids are only going to be young for such a short period of time. I know this, mine are 23 or 24 and 28. Have family cleaning parties, and because yes, you want to live in a tidy house, of course, where things feel clean and safe and you know where they are, but you also want that joy of playing with your kids and they want that from you. So try to create a little bit of balance, or set aside time when they're in bed to do the cleaning that you feel, compelled to do, rather than when they're awake. A lot of my clutter, says Dara, is because out of sight is out of mind, so I find it hard to put it out of sight. Tips. Um, I think actually one of the big things about clutter, and Randy Frost did a wonderful attitude this summer on hoarding, is that people are emotionally attached to their stuff and they can't break that emotional attachment. So they hold on to it because they believe they need to see it to make sure it exists, or they might need it at some future date. And what if they don't? What's going to happen then? So there's a lot of sort of negative expectations, and as well as this attachment that's often irrational to the things themselves. So I think that if out of sight is out of mind, and out of sight means you're accumulating clutter, then it's not actually really working for you. And what you want to do is set up some kind of routine where once a week you take this something that's out of sight, that's cluttered, and put it in a giveaway or a trash, or let's sell this one of these 3 bags, and then you know, remove them from where you live. It's very hard to do, but it's so important. And I think particularly these are the kinds of activities that are useful to do with someone else. Cheryl, I'm going to answer this last. I no longer feel that anything I do is good enough. You're breaking my heart. I have great intentions to believe in myself and my ability to complete tasks. I find myself anxious at failing before I even start, so self-defeating. Cheryl, what I want to say to you is you have value because you exist. You bring your light and your particular, unique self to the world, and that is good enough. And so you're setting these great intentions, and they may be just too much for you to actually do. Start smaller. Do a meditation once a day, once a week, on self-esteem. Read something by Tara Brach, or one of the other many wonderful people who have written about self-esteem for women. Start smaller. You've set up a failure expectation, and so we have to undo that by starting with really focusing on something you like about yourself. And one thing that I would do is to really consider at the end of each day in a journal, write down 3 things that went well that day. They don't have to be big things. It might be, uh, you did a load of laundry, which could be a big thing. It might be you took your dog for a walk, but something that can shift your mentality from how you're not good enough to the things that you're doing that are.